What's going on, guys? It's a nice, lovely day here in Austin, and currently going for a casual walk to the gym, which, I'm not gonna lie, as a stay-at-home parent, was something I didn't really realize I was gonna have to schedule into my day. I kind of figured, hey, I'm stay at home, let's work out whenever. And then, obviously, for anyone that has kids, understands that you're never really off the clock, so you kind of got to schedule your time a little bit better. So, getting onto that. So this next video, I'm not entirely sure what this one's gonna look like just yet, but I do have an idea for what my bankroll challenge is gonna be, so stay tuned to get some more information on that at the end, and with that, let's get into some poker.
All right, guys, let's get into this first hand. On this first hand, we are sitting in the small blind with ace, queen of hearts. Action folds around to us, and we go ahead and raise it to $16. The big blind is just sitting down and hasn't even gotten his chips yet, but he goes ahead and he raises it up to 60. Not really much to do here other than to just call and go ahead and see a run out. So we call, and we head straight to a flop that's not super favorable to us. 5 of diamonds, 3 of clubs, 9 of spades. So we go ahead and check, and then the big blind does something weird. The big blind leads out for $200. That is a massive overbet on the flop here, and there really isn't much for us to do. We don't have anything on the board. We don't have any backdoor draws. So ultimately, we just have to go ahead and fold. The very next hand, while the player to our right is still stacking our chips, we go ahead and look down at our hand, and now we have ace-queen offsuit on the button. +2 opens for $20. The middle position, the low jack, and we call as well. And the small blind also comes along. So we're heading straight to a flop 5 ways. And the flop comes pretty favorable for us. It comes ace, 10, ace. We go ahead, it checks around to us, and we go ahead and lead out for $30, and literally every single person calls. Okay, not great, probably some draws coming along with us, but we've got trips that's not really too big of a deal. And we go off and we see a turn 5 ways to the 3 of spades. Action checks back around to us, and at this point, this is where we make a mistake. We go ahead and we jam all in. The small blind snap calls us. We flip over our ace queen, and he doesn't turn his hand over yet. And then we go to a river, jack of diamonds. After looking at the river for probably a good 30 seconds, he goes ahead and flips over 9, 7 of spades, and we end up losing this pot to a slow roll. So after those back-to-back coolers, we go absolutely card dead, which not a great place to be, especially if you're just a little tilted, which is exactly what I am right now. I'm just sitting here steaming at the table, knowing that I made a massive mistake on that hand. I should have just been able to fold it, and I didn't. But instead, I'm card dead, I'm tilted, and at this point, I decide that, you know what? I need to take a step away from the table. So I go ahead and I walk away from the table for about 20 minutes, decide the game's good, and then come back in and rebuy and get on to round 2. Okay, after calming down a little bit, we go ahead and take our seat back at the table. We are under the gun, and we look down at pocket jacks. We go ahead and open to $10, as this game has been relatively action heavy, so there's a pretty good chance someone will 3-bet us out of one of the other later positions, but unfortunately, nobody does. Instead, it folds around to the button, and the button, small blind, and the big blind all just flat call our bets. All right, well, it looks like this is going to be a grindy session, but nothing wrong with that. So we go ahead and we just head off straight to a flop, which comes down pretty favorably for us. It comes down 7 of spades, 3 of hearts, 2 of diamonds. No overcards, nothing crazy. Checks to the big blind, who bets 25. We could check raise here, but we're already a little tilted, so we probably make a mistake here and just flat call the big blind's raise instead of 3-betting. The other 2 blinds get out of the way, and we move off to a turn, which is the 9 of hearts. Well, now that there's a flush draw on the board, some straight draws, the big blind goes ahead and leads out for 65. Again, there are so many things that we should be doing here, but we're not in the greatest headspace, so we just go ahead and flat call once again. There's probably nothing wrong with flat calling here at this point. It could be a mistake. It could not be. I think it mixes or it's indifferent a little bit, but not a big deal. So at this point, we move on to a river, which this is why you should be raising and be aggressive on the earlier streets, because the river comes out the queen of diamonds. So the good news is that no flush draws get there, but we go ahead and check, and we flip over our jacks after the big blind asks us if his pair of sevens is good, and we go ahead and take down the pot. All right, guys, go ahead and strap in for this one, because to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing here. My headspace isn't exactly the greatest at this point. So we look down at Queen Nine of Hearts, and we go ahead and decide to limp in middle position. This hand candidate is probably more of a 3-bet or fold, but again, we've kind of been getting kicked in the head a little bit, and action limps around 6 ways. So it's a pretty decent sized pot, and when we get a flop of Queen of Clubs, 7 of Hearts, 5 of Hearts, we can feel pretty confident that if we don't have the absolute best hand, we've got a very, very good one. So we go ahead and lead out for $15. The player to our left calls, everyone else folds and gets out of the way. And at this point, all I'm really looking for is a way for our hand to improve. Any heart is going to be fantastic if we hit another queen, or even if we hit a 9 or some kind of 2 pair. Basically, any hand that improves, any card that improves our hand, or at least a brick, would be much, much appreciated. So we go off to a turn, which is the deuce of clubs. Well, that's about as bricky as any card gets. So we go ahead and we bet $30. And the player to our left doesn't really take too much time to think about it, and he just almost immediately calls. Little concerning that he's continuing on, but we go ahead and we go off to a river, which is the 5 of diamonds. And this is where it gets weird. We check, and the villain leads for 45. Well, that is not great for us. Okay, so let's take a step back and think about this. What does the 5 of diamonds really do for our opponent? It pairs the board, so pocket 7s or maybe pocket 2s just made a full house. It's not very likely that he's got pocket queens, as we block a lot of pocket queens. He might be on a busted flush draw, maybe ace high, but the hands that he would normally have from a flush draw perspective, like king, queen of hearts, we block. Ace, king of hearts, well, he would have 3-bet that pre-flop. So we're narrowing it down to, okay, he probably has a queen, and now we have to figure out, well, is his queen better than our queen? Our queen's okay, but it's not great. So we're sitting here and we are just in the blender. Do we call? Do we fold? We've been getting kicked in the face all night. We always seem to have second pair, second nuts, just second everything. Ultimately, though, we can't fold such a good hand. We go ahead and we call, and our opponent flips over Queen 8 offsuit for a kicker just underneath ours, and we go ahead and scoop another pot. Alrighty, folks, strap in for this one because this is going to be a rough one. We're playing a big bomb pot here. It's $5 per person, and we look down at 6, 6, 8, 10, 2 diamonds. Flop comes out on the top board, ace 10, 7, 2 hearts. Bottom board, 10, 5, 7, rainbow. Action checks around, and we head off to a turn, which looks pretty good for us. The turn comes the 9 of clubs on the top board and the 3 of hearts on the bottom. So we've got a straight on the top board and a straight draw on the bottom. This is where it gets interesting. The big blind goes ahead and leads out for $45. Seems like a pretty decent bet size to me. We go ahead and we call the $45, and the small blind also calls and comes along as well. Really, at this point, what we're looking for is we're looking to make that straight on the bottom board, and we're really hoping that the top board doesn't come either a heart or a pair to the board. The only thing we're really losing to is Jack 8 on that one. So we go off to a river. Top board comes 6 of spades. Bottom comes the 8 of clubs. We miss our straight draw on the bottom, but we make trips on the top. At this point, the big blind bets $125, and we kind of go into the tank a little bit. We have a decent straight on top, but it's not the best one. There's still one straight that we're losing to, and we have basically nothing on the bottom, just one pair. Ultimately, we decide that, you know what, it's probably worth it, so we go ahead and we call the 125, and the small blind also calls. Everyone tables their hand, and the big blind shows 10-8 for top 2 pair on the bottom board, and the small blind shows Jack 8 for the one straight that beats us on the top board, and we go ahead and end up losing a pretty big pot. Well, we got to dust ourselves off and move on to the next hand. The next hand, we are on the button, and we look down at pocket 7s. The low jack limps, and we go ahead and we decide to raise it up to $11. Middle position calls, and it ends up getting all the way back around to the low jack, who does something interesting. He does the old limp 3-bet, and he 3-bets to $55. For $55 in position, seems like we have a pretty easy call here. So we go ahead and we make the call, hoping to spike a 7 on the flop, or at least maybe hit some kind of a straight draw. And we go out to a really interesting flop. The flop comes 5, 6, 8, all diamonds. We go ahead and double check, and we have the 7 of diamonds. So when he checks to us, we go ahead and check it back. And the turn comes the 5 of clubs. Well, the low jack bets 75, simple call for us, and we run off to a river. The river is the 8 of spades. Low jack checks, we check it back, and the low jack tables pocket kings. Oh my God, would have been nice if we could have hit at least the 4 or 9 of diamonds, but c'est la vie, moving on to the next one. Alrighty, we are heading off to another bomb pot. Same deal, $5 per person. We look down at Jack 3, 8, 5 rainbow. Not exactly a great starting hand, but when the boards come out 2, 3, 8, 2 clubs, and Jack 3, 3, we're now looking pretty dang solid. Under the gun raises to $30. The middle position, the low jack, and the high jack all call, and action gets to us. At this point, we have top boat on the bottom with no possibility of really improving all that much. We can't get quads, so we go ahead and we decide to call for pot, which is $160. Figuring at this point we've got one board locked up, we might as well try and get as much money into the middle right now as we possibly can, which turns out to be a pretty good idea as the under the gun player thinks about it for a little while before ultimately landing on a call. Action heads over to the hijack player, who calls as well. Everyone else folds, and we go ahead and head to a turn. There's a couple of turns we definitely don't want to see, especially on the bottom board. But when it comes the deuce of hearts on the bottom and the queen of diamonds on the top, that's probably as good as it's going to get. Action checks to me, and we decide to pot one more time for $340, really putting the pressure on our opponents to see if they've got something that can beat us. Fortunately, neither of our opponents calls. They both fold, and we take down a pretty hefty pot. At this point, I'm not entirely sure what happened. Something messed up with my camera, so these last couple of hands, I apologize, we're not going to have some good images for. But for this hand, we look down at pocket kings under the gun. We open to $30 and get one call from the low jack. So we go ahead and head off to a pretty interesting flop. Flop comes down 6, jack, 5, rainbow. Seems like a pretty safe flop for us, so we go ahead and we bet out for $40. Action gets back to the low jack, who thinks for a little bit and then decides to just call. So we go off to a river, and at this point, we're feeling pretty comfortable. As long as an ace doesn't come, we're probably going to be in pretty good shape. The river comes the 8 of diamonds. Pretty innocuous, brings in a backdoor flush draw, so we go ahead and we check, hoping that the low jack leads out with something like top pair, maybe ace jack or something like that. The low jack does indeed fall for it and bets 60. We go ahead and we call and head off to a river. River comes the 9 of hearts, and we go ahead and check to induce maybe a small bet from the low jack. But that's not exactly what we get. The low jack goes ahead and jams for $276. Okay, not really sure what exactly it is he's jamming here. I can't really come up with any wild bluffs. Maybe he's overvaluing ace jack. So we go ahead and call and end up losing when the low jack shows us pocket sevens for a rivered straight. Doing our best to not get tilted, we look down at ace king offsuit. The low jack raises to $6, and we go ahead and we 3-bet to 18. Action gets around to the small blind, who calls. The low jack comes along, and we go to a flop of ace jack 7, 2 diamonds. Action checks to me, and I go ahead and I bet $35, and only the small blind calls. So we're going off to a river, which is the 10 of diamonds. Small blind bets $40 now. We feel that, okay, the diamonds got there, but there isn't much else. So we go ahead and we call the $40, hoping to get a decent river run out, and we get the 9 of hearts. At this point, the small blind jams all in, and all I can really do at this point is just throw my hands up in the air. I can't seem to get a clean run out at any point. So we go into the tank trying to figure out what is he going to jam here with. Well, he's not jamming with anything worse than what we have. So ultimately, I just go ahead and fold. Any decent ace gets there with a 2 pair. The flush draw got there, a straight draw got there. It's just not a good look for us, and we just chalk this one up and have to move on to the next hand. Heading into the last hand of this session, it's a pretty interesting one. We are sitting on the button with pocket 9s. The under the gun player decides to raise it to 15, and the low jack, hijack, and cutoff all call. Here we have a pretty easy decision. We go ahead and just call. We could 3-bet, but we don't necessarily have to, and we head off to a flop. Jack 9 queen. So we flop bottom set, and the under the gun player bets $35. Hijack calls, and we go ahead and we decide to call as well and hope for something bricky on the turn, which is exactly what we get when the deuce of diamonds falls. Action checks around to me, and we go ahead and we bet $75 just to kind of see where everyone's at. The under the gun player calls the 75, and the hijack player goes ahead and just gets out of the way. The river card, not great. 8 of clubs, but the under the gun player checks. We go ahead and bet $125 and just pray we don't get snap called by a 10, which fortunately we don't. So now that we've faded the snap call, we are just praying that the under the gun player has something like ace queen, or maybe even queen jack or jack 9, or just some kind of 2 pair, and they can find the call. They're in the tank for what seems like forever, but unfortunately, they end up finding the fold. This is the last interesting hand of the session. I've been here for hours. I've been up and down and swinging left and right, and I feel like it's definitely time for me to cash out. So let's go ahead and head to an outro. Yeah, that sucked. So I was into that session for probably about 6 hours or so, and not gonna lie, I was just getting hit left and right. I could not get anything going. For every hand I won, it seemed like I lost one that was slightly bigger and kept just trending down and down and down. Ultimately, before I knew it, I was in the hole for almost $1,100 at the session. That was around the time I stepped outside to kind of cool my head a little bit, and when I decided the game was good, just hopped back in and ended up grinding that back up. So up here, you're going to see the totals of how much I was in for, how much I was out for, what my total profit was. I think my total profit was like $108. So for 6 hours of play, to only won $108, not super great. But that's poker. Sometimes sessions just kind of go like that, and it is what it is, and you just kind of got to chalk it up and move on to the next one. That being said, I have figured out what I'm going to do for my bankroll challenge. I've been trying to figure out a way to kind of incorporate a lot of different things into this. I didn't want this to be just another standard bankroll challenge. So if you have no interest in that, this is the end of the video. I appreciate you guys coming on, but if you stick around, I'm going to kind of walk you guys through that a little bit and what my idea is. So thanks for sticking around, everyone. So if you're interested in what my bankroll challenge is going to be, I didn't want this to be a pretty standard bankroll challenge, and the impetus for what I kind of came up with actually happened while I was putting my daughter down for a nap the other day. She recently learned how to climb into and out of her crib, and that's kind of from what I've understood and what we've been told, that's kind of a milestone as to when you're supposed to kind of start getting rid of some of those baby stuff and start moving into some of the more kid things. So I am going to be launching with my next video my baby bedroom bankroll challenge. I am a fan of alliteration, if you can't tell. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking to win about $7,500. I'm going to completely retrofit my daughter's bedroom, get rid of the crib and get rid of a lot of the baby stuff, and fully deck it out into what I will hope will be the perfect kid room for her to hang out, play in, have storage for all of her stuff and everything else. So if you're interested in that and you kind of want to join me on the journey, the next video is going to be the beginning of that. It's going to be so that'll be my road to the baby bedroom bankroll challenge. And appreciate you sticking around to hear about that, and look forward to that content. If you could give me a like and a subscribe, really helps the kind of grow out the channel, and I look forward to seeing you all on the next one. Peace.